If you're filming something and it still looks amateur, chances are it's your camera settings that are holding you back. Now, this video is going to teach you exactly what I use for camera settings and the idea and concepts behind camera settings. So it's definitely a beginner level video who's looking to step more into the pro world of videography or video production. But if you already know some of these things, it's always great to watch and just refresh your memory on some of these camera settings. Maybe you'll learn something you didn't as well. So we're going to talk about things like frame rate, shutter speed, ISO, and aperture today in this video. Plus, I also have a bonus at the end, a tool that I bring with me to every single wedding that I shoot, any job that I'm on, especially if I'm outside. So we'll see that at the end as well. Okay, so first is the frame rate. And to put it really simply, frame rate is how many pictures your camera is taking in a 1 second period of time. So 24 frames per second means that in 1 second of footage, there are going to be 24 individual pictures being taken by your camera. 30 frames per second means there's 30 pictures. 60 means 60, 120 obviously means there's 120 photos in 1 second of time. So the higher your frame rate, the more photos, or in other words, the more data is going to be in each second of footage. Typically 24 frames per second kind of matches the human eye and is really pleasing in cinematography, in film, in movies, and things of that nature. 30 frames per second is typically used on TV or for broadcast. 60 and above is going to be when you want to do things like slow motion, so for weddings or sports. Sports are even going to go up into 120, 240, or even higher sometimes. And here's something really important to know. The reason why you would film at a higher frame rate to get slow motion is because you want as much data, as many pictures, as many frames in that second as possible. The more frames you have, the more you can slow that clip down because there's so much extra data that that clip has, which is going to allow you to have smooth slow motion. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about shutter speed, but just know higher frame rate's good for slow motion, 60 and above if you want to do something in slow motion. There are some complex things about getting slow motion where you put like a 60 frames per second clip in a 24 frames per second timeline, which allows you to slow that clip down to 40% of its original speed for smooth slow motion, but that's another video, another time. So that's frame rate. Again, 24 frames per second is cinema, 30 is broadcast or TV, 60 and above is for sports, weddings, or anything you want to do slow motion for. Next up, we're going to talk about shutter speed. Now, shutter speed is really interesting because it pairs with your FPS, your frames per second. Shutter speed is typically shown on your camera as a fraction of a second or an angle. For the sake of this video, we're just going to keep things simple and talk about the fraction of second shutter speed. So if you look at your camera, you might see something like 1/30 or 1/60 or 1/4000 or something like that. And that is the readout of your shutter speed. Say that your shutter speed is 1/60. That's saying for every second of footage, your shutter is going to open and close 60 times. Now, to put things simply, the shutter is like when you take a picture and it goes, that is the shutter opening and then closing. So in video, remember when we were talking about frames per second, a 60 frames per second clip means there are 60 pictures being taken in 1 second that then, get all put together into a nice video clip. And when you hit play, those pictures look like video. Your shutter speed is telling your camera how long to allow light in for each one of those individual pictures. So there's a lot of stuff going on in a really short amount of time. A really easy way to get an idea for this is to take out your camera, and I encourage you to do this now or after this video. Take out your camera, set your shutter speed to something like 1/10. That's a really slow shutter, and film something. And what you'll see is this really hazy, blurred, dreamlike look. Next, go and film something at a really high shutter speed, like 1/2000, 1/3000, or crank it as high as you can. And two things you'll notice is one, the movement of your clip gets really kind of highly detailed, almost like uncomfortably detailed. Second, you'll see as you turn that shutter speed up, your image is getting darker because again, you're taking pictures faster. The higher your shutter speed, the shorter amount of time that the sensor is going to be exposed to light, which means less light is getting into your camera. A really interesting side note about turning your shutter speed up, the movie Saving Private Ryan actually did this in the opening scene, the very famous opening scene of the Normandy landings in 1944. They turned the shutter speeds up on their cameras because it creates this jarring, uncomfortable effect where, things aren't moving exactly how they should, or things almost seem like surreal, but not in a dreamlike way, like a slow shutter speed, almost in like a tense way with a higher shutter speed. So they actually turned their shutter speeds up for the D-Day landings to create this really tense, uncomfortable feeling while all these men are storming the beaches of Normandy. So to summarize, I know that's a lot of information. A slower shutter speed is going to let more light into your camera, but it's going to look choppier as you get too slow. A higher shutter speed is going to restrict light getting into your camera, but it's going to start to become unnatural as you get to a higher shutter speed. But this is the really important thing about shutter speeds, and if you get anything out of this video, you need to know this. When filming anything, the basic rule of thumb for shutter speed, I know a lot of stuff that we just talked about could have been really confusing. It's confusing to me. The rule of thumb that you should know for your shutter speed is to just multiply your frame rate by 2 and set your shutter as close to that as possible. So if you're filming in 30 frames per second, multiply by 2, that's 60. Set your shutter speed to 160. If you're filming in 60 frames per second, set it to 120. The FX3 actually can't do 120, so I do 125. This is going to create the most natural and the most pleasing look to the eye in terms of motion blur and how each one of those little photos in that 1 second of time comes out. Also, if you're planning on doing slow motion, you need a faster shutter speed because we're going to be looking at some of those photos that you normally wouldn't see when we stretch that clip out. Again, I know some of that can be kind of confusing, especially as a beginner when you're just trying to learn settings. So the important thing to remember is multiply your frame rate by 2 and set your shutter to it. And don't leave that if you don't have to. That will work for slow motion, that will work for normal speed stuff. I don't encourage people to use shutter speed as a way to control the brightness or the exposure of their image. Just leave that at 2 times your frame rate, lock it even. I have it locked on my Sony FX3 so I don't accidentally bump it or change it. Just leave it alone. Okay, the third setting, one that I harp on probably the most on Instagram, is the ISO setting of your camera. Now, this is a digital setting on your camera that is going to augment the light coming into the sensor to brighten or darken your image. A lot of people go to this first when adjusting exposure, and really they should be going to this last or second to last. Shutter speed shouldn't really be touched for exposure either. And this is the important thing. Every camera has a base ISO. That is the setting on which the manufacturers of the camera said, hey, this setting of ISO is where there's going to be no digital noise. Now remember, this is a digital process. You're actually technically increasing the voltage to the sensor in some way that is going to make the image brighter, but because it's digital, it's not actually adding light to the frame. And the more you push that, the less clear your image is going to get. You've probably experienced this. You film something and you're just like, whoa, this just looks really, really bad. Why does this look so bad? And it's probably because you went to your ISO and cranked it way up to try to brighten up your image. You're really doing the same thing as when you take out your iPhone, take a picture, and you go to edit mode and you just say, I want this to be brighter, and you turn the slider all the way up. You're digitally making your image brighter and it just doesn't look good. So for ISO, you really, really, really want to keep your camera at base ISO if possible. I'm filming on the Sony FX3 right now. The base ISO of the FX3 is 800 and 12,800. It's a dual base ISO camera, meaning I have 2 options. I have a lower ISO setting at 800. So if I'm outdoors, bright, I'm in a big studio with a lot of lights, I'm going to set it to 800. Or if it's really dark, or if I'm filming in like a reception hall for a wedding, which happens a lot, I'm going to switch that ISO up to 12,800. The farther up you go from your base ISO, you're slowly going to start to add noise to your image. Now you can get away with a couple stops up. So if you're at 800 and you're just like, man, I need a little bit more light, and you go up to 1600, that's 1 stop above 800. Not a big deal. You're really not going to introduce that much noise. People won't notice, you probably won't notice, and you'll probably be fine. But if you want to see a really, really great example of this, on the FX3, go to 12,800 and go backwards 1 stop. Go 1 stop back before you get to that second base ISO, and you can visually see, even on the little tiny screen on the camera, you can visually see all this noise, all this grain just pop into your image because you're no longer at one of the recommended settings for the camera. You're now telling the camera, hey, crank the voltage to the sensor, make the image brighter, and it just looks really, really bad. So again, if you take anything from this section, go on Google, type in your camera's name and body, Sony FX3 base ISO, and go look and it'll tell you right away, here's the base ISO of your camera. An important note about that though, even on the FX3, if you're filming in S Cinetone, your base ISO is actually going to be different. I don't know off the top of my head what it is. I'll put it right here. The base ISO of S Cinetone is different than when you're in like flexible ISO or Cine EI mode on the camera. So really just go on Google, type in what is the base ISO of my camera when I'm filming in Rec 709, when I'm filming in S-Log3, when I'm filming in S Cinetone. Just become an expert in your camera's base ISO settings, understand what it means, understand how to change your ISO, and go do some experimenting. Go look at what happens. Film the same clip at 4 different ISOs and then go try to color grade it, and you'll see immediately that it doesn't look good. The farther away you get from your base ISO, the less clean your image is going to get. So many people are buying new cameras, buying new lenses, buying new gear, trying all different things because their image doesn't look right. And if they just got this one thing right, they would be professionals. Your image would look so much cleaner if you just stayed at your base ISO. That rant is over. I do want to talk about a couple more things here. White balance. For me personally, I don't use auto white balance. I used to use it a lot, but I found that sometimes in the middle of a clip, the camera would change the white balance and it would be a nightmare to edit in post. So now what I do for weddings, which are really dynamic panoramic events is I set my white balance myself by my eye. I have my wedding cinema LUT on my camera, which is what I use to edit weddings, so I kind of have an idea of what my final image is going to look like when I'm filming. And when I go into any new location at a wedding, whether it's the ceremony, the reception, or where we're doing portraits, I'll look at my monitor and I'll look and say, okay, does this look too warm? Does this look too cold? How do the skin tones look? And then I'll adjust my color temperature and I'll get it close. And then here's the thing, I don't touch it. As long as I'm at that location, I don't change it. This is gonna help a lot in post because you can always adjust the temperature, you can always adjust the white balance, and you should be adjusting the white balance in post-production as well. The important thing is here for white balance, you just want consistency and you just wanna get it in the ballpark of normal looking. You can adjust it and correct it and finalize it later in your editor, but the last thing you want is multiple white balances when you're filming in one location, especially for something like a wedding where you're in one place for maybe an hour or two and every clip is like a different white balance. It's gonna really lengthen out the time of your editing. It's gonna be really annoying in post. So set it manually. Again, you can go on Google and just like, how do I change the white balance on a Sony FX3? And it'll tell you. You can learn all these things really easily. You just need to learn what like the best practices are. And this is a good practice for white balance. Now, if you're in the studio, you're gonna use a gray card and you're gonna really make sure you nail it every single time. But for something like a wedding or for hobbyists or for a YouTube channel, really just getting it close is gonna go farther than you think. Lastly, I wanna talk about an artistic and fun one, aperture. This is one that everybody gets on. It's the little F number when you buy a lens. Maybe it says f2.8 like the lens I'm using. There are some lenses that are much higher, like think about a probe lens, they're like f22. And you might be thinking like, I have no idea what that means, Pete, or I don't know what aperture is yet, so please explain. Every lens has these blades inside them, and if you look into your lens, you'll actually see as you change the f-stop of your lens, you'll see these blades start to close, and those blades are controlling the amount of light that is now going through the lens and hitting the sensor. Just like when you speed your shutter speed to a crazy high number like 1/2000, that's going to restrict how much light is hitting the sensor. Physically closing blades in your lens that block the light is actually also going to control what light hits your sensor as well. It's pretty obvious. So a really high f-stop like f20 or f22 means those blades are really closed off. There's not a lot of light coming in. A really low f-stop, or in lens terms a fast f-stop like 2.8, means those blades are really wide open and can look right down the barrel of the lens and a ton of light is just flooding into that lens. This is probably the best way to control the light that hits your sensor. Way above changing your frame rate, way above changing your shutter speed. Honestly, you should never change your frame rate or shutter speed to affect how much light is hitting your sensor. This should be your first or second method of darkening or brightening your image. If the image is a little dark, open up the lens. That means lowering the f-stop. If your image is too bright, close off the lens, raise your f-stop. This is going to simply adjust how much light is hitting your sensor without adjusting or messing up any of the other settings you have on your camera. Now there is a caveat to this, and you'll notice this immediately. The lower f-stop you use, the more bokeh or blur in the background you're going to have, and the shorter range of focus you're going to have. So an f2.8 means that the range of things that is in focus is going to be smaller compared to like an f15 or f20. You're gonna have a lot more in focus and less blur in the background. Now this can sometimes handcuff you or change how your image looks, but this can also be a great help. A lower f-stop like 2.8 is gonna create a really artistic look. You're gonna have a lot of beautiful bokeh and blur in the background, and really only your subject is gonna be really sharp and in frame. It can be harder to catch focus in this way, but things look really beautiful and creamy when you do that. And now a higher f-stop, things are gonna look a little bit more like they're all in focus, almost like you're maybe filming it on an iPhone. And this is really great for like the ceremony camera of a wedding. I'll turn the f-stop down to f10, 12, 13, 14 when I'm filming the ceremony of a wedding from a tripod, because I wanna make sure as much is in focus as possible. Granted, that will darken the image. I know that's kind of all over the place. Here are the things you need to know about aperture, also known as f-stop. A lower f-stop like 2.8 is gonna have more blur in the background, but it's gonna let a lot of light into your lens. So if you're in a dark room, a lower f-stop like 2.8 is gonna really help your image be brighter without changing your settings. A higher f-stop is going to darken your image. It's going to restrict the light coming into your camera, but more is going to be in focus. So if you're filming an event or something where you want like the background a little bit more in focus and less blurry, raise your f-stop, but know that it's going to darken your image. Here's the bonus, and this honestly should be another part of this video, not just a bonus. ND filters are a fourth way that you can change the light that is coming into your camera. You've got your frame rate, your shutter speed, your aperture, and then you've got ND filters. There's a bunch of different kinds. There are sensor ND filters, there are built-in ND filters, there are ND filters that you put in a matte box, and there are variable ones that can change, and there are static ND filters. And basically what they are is like darkened glass that is also restricting how much light comes into your camera. So this is a fourth way, and honestly for me, a primary way to lower the amount of light coming into your camera. So you can go outside and film something on a wide open lens like f2.8 at 12,800, and if you have a powerful enough ND filter, everything will look fine because you're actually restricting the light coming into the camera via this darkened piece of glass on the end of your lens. When I'm filming a portrait session for a wedding outside, it's usually really bright, the sun's out. I don't want to change my f-stop to something really high like f15, especially for a portrait session where I want that dreamy, magical, artistic look. I want my lens to be at f2.8 for that. But naturally, like we said before, the lower the f-stop, the more light is going to come into my camera, so I'm probably going to end up overexposing. An ND filter will allow me to run my lens at f2.8, and then I can just adjust my ND filter to darken my image alone. The only downside of ND filters is the lower quality ones will sometimes distort the image, you'll get vignetting, or sometimes, you know, it's another layer of glass between your sensor and the outside world. You can smudge, scratch, or damage it as well. I used to not use ND filters, and now I have one for every lens, every camera body that I own. I take them everywhere I go. Honestly, on this camera that I kind of use for general fun and life and YouTube stuff, it doesn't come off the lens. It stays on that camera forever. Okay, I know that was a lot of stuff. I know that maybe feels overwhelming, a lot of concepts, a lot of just kind of like dipping your toes in some of the waters of these settings. You should have a good foundation to now go on Google, now go on YouTube and start searching around and be like, okay, this is my camera. I need to know my base ISOs. I need to know how to change my white balance. I need to know the f-stop of my lens and how to control that from the camera and how to control that from the actual lens. You should have a bunch of ideas on how you can go become a master of these settings. And settings are important to understand because when you're filming a wedding or you're on the job, you don't want to be fumbling around trying to figure out what something is, how it works, or how to change it. If you're on the job and someone says, hey, we need this white balance set to 3000, you need to just be like, you got it. And you need to be able to just go in and change your white balance. The last thing you want to do is take out your phone and Google how to change white balance on Sony FX3 when you're on set or when the wedding ceremony is happening. You know, you need to know these things ahead of time so that when you have a job, when you're working, you come off as a professional, you do a good job, and you have good footage. All the footage in this video was edited with my wedding cinema LUT. I use that for every wedding I film, and I honestly also use it for a lot of other projects as well. And if you want that LUT, the link is in the description of this video, so feel free to go check that out. Otherwise, you can support me for free by liking this video, subscribing to my channel. I'm super new on YouTube, so I'm still just figuring things out, and I appreciate everyone commenting and just being super nice here. This is a great platform, and I'm having a blast making these videos. I hope this helped you, and I'll see you in the next video.